Hello, is it me you're looking for?
So around the 15th of this month, Visionary Realms held a developer live stream featuring their content creators known as Minus and Ronick, and the topics of the day involved class changes for the Rogue, Cleric, and Enchanter, and the character model design and rigging updates that included commentary from some of the team members. But as I stated the last time they did a class and session segment, I'd rather save those for later down the line as we start getting closer to the first alpha and we can start doing more detailed class guides. So for today, let's talk about the changes surrounding the character models and the recent Parting the Veil showcase they did related to the taming and mount discussion. So during the developer livestream, they featured two specific artists from their team in Visionary Realms. So these are two people on the team that are handling re-rigging and the character animations, which also includes, of course, character models. Terra is introduced as the one that's been redesigning the existing humans and will be taking on the rest of the character races, as well as armor, creatures, and whatever else she can. Something I want to mention that I really found cool is that she mentioned having a background in zoology. Now me personally, I don't know what it is about myself and people that study this, but if there was ever anyone that I could think could be in charge of designing fantasy-based characters like Scar, Dark Myrrh, or the Archai in Pantheon, it probably would be someone who's familiar with zoology, so I think this is a perfect selection. Duarte, on the other hand, is a character animator and rigger in Visionary Realms with a background in programming. He's been doing animation for 5 years and been working in the industry for 1. He's responsible for the animation for characters and creatures along with building the skeletons and other systems that will operate and bring the character to life. I want to stop here and go on a tangent really quick because I don't think there's enough credit given to people that are graphical artists, animations, rigging, character design. This is an incredibly complex process. If I wanted to commission someone to make a 3D animation that consisted of about 2 characters and let's say was about 10 seconds long, this would include of course a background and all the other basic necessities. On average, that'd be anywhere from about $350 to $500. Keep in mind I'm talking about 3D, but even 2D can be fairly complex to accomplish unless we're talking about stick figures. And hell, even then, some of the stick figure animations people have made have been absolutely crazy. I sure as hell never got this far during the animation course in middle school. But anyway, yeah, they actually a little while ago explained during the live stream the reasoning behind why they haven't really focused on a Pantheon trailer. And granted, I think they were talking about cinematics, but basically mentioned how it would be such a costly thing to do in this early stage, so they'd rather focus on other stuff. Personally though, I do think they could use just in-game recorded footage and assets to make one, because that probably won't cost as much as they mentioned during the live stream it might if they tried it. But anyway, back to the stream. The first thing they discuss is what has caused this decision to remodel and re-rig the player character races. The response comes from Terra first, stating that when she was first hired, the main concern she was asked to address was armor fitting. Followed by the optimization of the existing character models, what she did was decide to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and take the opportunity to make aesthetic improvements that Joppa and a few others were hoping to see. They next described the baseline definition of what the armor fitting would be, and in this situation we would see various characters with all kinds of different body types, and since they'll be wearing the same armor, the model for every single piece of armor will somehow need to be fitted to every single body type. The old character models they had were made in such a way that the only real way to fit the armor to each one was to manually fit every single mesh to every single character, which probably would not have worked in the long run. They also included some comparison pictures to showcase the improvements made between the older models and the new, and you can really see the details shining through. So this new process they're going for is going to help with at least partially automating armor fitting to both save them a ton of time and allow them to rework the existing character models and address the aesthetic concern, as well as optimizing the models and textures. Although don't worry for those of you who are hoping for a more customizable experience, because they did mention that aspect as well. Now currently the new characters have been confirmed to be bald, but they stated that they will be incorporating a number of hairstyles to be available for every race, and this new hair should go as far as being an improvement on the older models we've seen in the previous showcase. And a side project they've been working on alongside the character rigging and armor fitting systems will tie into character customization. The old models didn't really leave room for customization, which meant that everybody would be stuck with the same body types and a small amount of heads to choose from. In the process of coming up with how they would handle armor, they realized that a lot of their optimization would make it possible to consider more targeted customization. Visionary Realms would like to offer as much customization as they are able to deliver, which means that we as players will have the option to change facial features of our characters. The customization will also include character height, how large our heads will be, how thick our legs are, etc. A lot of the rest of the discussion had to do with the design process of the rigging and armor, alongside a few extra details regarding the character model possibilities. But as far as the armor fitting goes, they confirmed that the humans are now in their final stages with a whole new armor pipeline established, but for the rest of the character races, the next to be tied into the armor fitting system will be the Dark Myr, followed by the Archai, Scar, Ogre, Elf, Dwarf, Halfling, and finally Gnome. Now let's move on to Parting the Veil Live. I've been in extreme anticipation for this discussion because mountain travel in general had become such a hot topic when it comes to MMOs, but there's also so many possibilities there, especially when you talk about incorporating a system like taming. This stream was over an hour long and packed with a ton of detail that I've been so excited to break down for you all. The first topic they cover is how the taming and mount system will tie into travel as a whole. Traveling around the world is something that players will spend an incredible amount of time doing. There's going to be plenty of ways for us to do this, including sprinting, climbing, swimming, teleporting through mages and druids, and of course, mounted travel. One of the first things Joppa tells us during the stream is that as long as he's on the team, there will not be any plans to add flying mounts later in the game. Flying mounts is one of those travel methods that would allow players to bypass so many different parts of the exploration system, and climbing is one of the main examples given during this segment. Imagine if you could find a lonely storm drake on top of a mountain that you needed to grind 50 levels of climbing skill to reach, only for it to be rendered completely meaningless by someone else being able to utilize a method of flying. Their aim for the travel system is to ensure the experience is meaningful. The world of Pantheon needs to be large, but travel also needs to take enough time, even in some cases be challenging enough, that it makes the moment of arrival feel significant. Joppa describes his desired MMO experience as one where riding a mount feels visceral. You're going to have a sense that you are truly moving swiftly throughout the world, and mounts will be an extension of your character as opposed to a means to an end. The heart of the system is all about creating additional ways for players to travel throughout the world of Terminus, but also to allow us to engage and form a bond with the animals we use for this traversal method. Taming is going to be an opt-in system that players can choose to unlock after reaching the proper level and completing a series of quest lines, similar to how we would go about becoming a keeper. Once the required level is reached and the quest line completed, players will be receiving the animal taming skill and corresponding taming ability. This will need to be assigned to the action bar, but there will also be a few use conditions related to this that you'll need to be aware of. The first thing is not every single animal you come across can be tamed. For example, just because you see a wild horse doesn't mean you'll be able to tame it and ride it. And that's meant to reflect that animals have different temperaments. Some are more vulnerable to being tamed, while others may simply be seen as too wild-hearted. Second, the target animal cannot be a higher level than you. It has to be of equal or lower level to you, and the player will need to have enough animal taming skill to tame the animal if the animal taming skill is required. So just doing the quest lines leading up to unlocking the taming system may be enough some of the time to tame the animal, but there will be certain rare animals that require specific amounts of animal taming in order to tame them. And then in addition to this, for the animal taming to be successful, the animal cannot enter combat with you before the taming process begins. So naturally, if you're attempting to capture a rare mount that may be hostile in nature, you may need to reset the aggro if you get too close before being able to tame it. This also makes me wonder if rogues may be the best animal tamers due to their stealth mechanics or potentially having ways of decreasing the aggro radius. Maybe you could even collaborate with the rogue and pay them for their services to do this. In fact, according to the website, the rogues do have a passive known as Like a Ghost, which permanently reduces the range at which hostile enemies can target them. And it makes me wonder if the target can also have the taming process started if it's mesmerized, because in that case, both rogues and enchanters would be great for utilizing that to get into the right position to start the tame. But when it comes to the actual taming process, and like I mentioned, rogues might be really good at this, you need to sneak up on the target without the animal hearing you. Every player, regardless of class, will be able to crouch and walk towards the target to be able to accomplish this. And Joppa explains how the team plans to have several different forms of mob aggression. Some will be triggered through sight, some through hearing, some through smell, and more that the team doesn't want to dive into quite yet. After we get in range, we can start the process by using the tame animal ability. We will climb on top of the animal and must remain mounted while the animal is tamed. And during this time, there are going to be certain actions we can take, certain things we may need to respond to in order to stay on top of the animal until the taming process is complete. In addition to this, our endurance is going to play an important role. While we're engaging in the taming process, our endurance will start getting depleted and utilized through the duration. And if our endurance pool is not large enough to complete the entire process, we'll fail to tame the animal. So in the case of some animals we come across, we may not have enough endurance to complete the full cycle, and in turn, we will end up failing to tame. But once we have actually tamed the animal, we'll be able to ride it freely as our mount. I wouldn't be surprised if during the taming process, we also have to keep the animal away from other creatures, or at least be aware of the other creatures while taming it in fear of external aggro. They also mention that there might be a way for us to identify which animals are tameable aside from the level requirements. This mechanic is known currently as consideration. So if you're looking at an animal that appears to be of equal or lower level, but it's also a rare, the consideration mechanic would let you know that this animal would be a challenging tame, which means that it's tameable, but there's something more than level at play here. But let's say you're inspecting something that is tameable, but it's of higher level or a rare type and you don't have enough taming to challenge it, you would see something like, this animal is beyond your ability to tame. And lastly, if it's not tameable in the slightest, it just won't say anything. You'd see other information in the consideration mechanic, but not anything about it being tameable. Now, as we explore through the world, we'll be coming across animals that might have special traits. You might see ones that aid with things like climbing, aquatic travel, even things like stealth to a degree. But not only will these animals have special and non-special traits we can find them with, but they'll also have stats on them too. All tameable animals are going to have 5 attributes. The first is speed. This is going to modify the base movement speed and the sprinting speed of the mount. The second is endurance. The higher the endurance, the larger the endurance pool the animal will have, which means you can sprint longer, for example. The third one is stability, which will modify how likely you are to get knocked off the animal if you take damage. The fourth is handling. This will play into how well the animal can maneuver as you ride them, along with their acceleration or deacceleration rate. And the last one is going to be will, which determines how long the tamed animal will be willing to let you ride it. There's more that goes into this specific one, but these are the 5 different attributes we'll be coming across for the animal. When you tame an animal, you're going to have access to an additional window in your character sheet that lets you view the mount you have and see what stats it has once you've tamed it. These animals will also fall into their own respective categories that are going to dictate their primary stats and secondaries. For example, an animal that falls into the swift category is going to be one that has speed as its primary stat, endurance as the secondary, and stability as the third. Now, Joppa does mention during the live stream that they do have a plan for a sort of bond system allowing for further progression for mounts we own. So this means that if you own a level 10 horse but are contemplating ditching it in favor of a higher level one, the bond system will establish a way for us to further progress the lower level in terms of stats. So in terms of rare animals, among other bonuses, they will also be capable of having 2 attributes as their primary stats instead of 1. A rare animal might instead have a category such as Dauntless, meaning it would take endurance and stability as primary stats. And one last really cool thing they mention about rare animals is because they are more based off the animal taming skill and not the level themselves, you can actually find incredibly high statted animals at lower levels. This might also tie into the fact that in certain areas of the game, especially low level, we won't exclusively see things just within that specific level range. As we talked about during the progression video, you could easily see high level areas embedded within the lower level ones, so not only could you potentially find rare animals of lower level that have very high stats, but you might also find other animals that are actually high levels near these areas, and potentially see some rares embedded within them. So the 5th attribute we mentioned earlier that animals have when tamed is known as will. This is the stat that determines how long the animal is going to be willing to let you ride it and how content it is with being your mount. And the thing about will is it's going to roll independent to these other stats, regardless of the mount's level or rarity. It will always have a chance of rolling somewhere between 1 and max, so you could end up with a pretty bad stat rollout across the board but still have maximum will on that specific animal. This stat determines how long you can ride the mount without stabling it, and if you were to be knocked off or dismounted at any time, the idea is that the mount would not leave, but if left unattended for an extended amount of time, it will return to the stable. You will also not be able to tame another animal while yours is out and about with you. In addition to this, stable slots will not come freely, so this may end up costing you a fair amount of gold. If you did end up in a situation where you were knocked off your mount and it was returned to the stable, this would give you the opportunity to look for another one to tame on your way back. It was also mentioned that there will be items we can equip to the mount, and we may see a section in the inventory menu to accomplish this. And as for classes, druids may have the ability to enhance the mounts they ride in one way or another. However, there doesn't seem to be any plans currently for mounted combat, whether it's in the alpha or past release. So far, that's everything you need to know regarding the mounts, but I also wanted to talk about my impressions with the mount system and how I think it will affect the entire gameplay experience overall. So I've always been an advocate for having more complex gameplay systems because me personally, when it comes to life skill or mounted content in games, I've enjoyed them way more when there's more detail and complexity to these systems rather than just being an instantaneous side feature to be used with no impact on your experience. A mount system like what they're describing reminds me a whole lot of what we had in a game like Black Desert Online. You could run out in the world to tame wild horses to bring back and stable, but you could also breed them, equip them with gear. There was an entire progression system behind it, and for a lot of people it became a primary part of their enjoyment for the game. It does make me wonder if Pantheon will ever make it possible to trade these mounts amongst ourselves to create a market for it. But either way, I'm super excited to see how this design evolves, and I really hope they follow through with it. Over the next few Pantheon videos, I'd like to have a deeper discussion regarding this topic, along with some of the other mentioned details in this stream, such as the wizard and druid portals and naval mechanics. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful night or day, and farewell.